Are you wondering how to get from this to this? I'll tell you how. Well, today I'm going to show you how to make the fold-up style of advent calendar, and it's the easiest and quickest one you're going to make. I'm going to be making the Christmas Eve one from Nutex. So it comes like this as a big long panel, and you're going to end up with something that's this size. So this is another Nutex one. This is last year's. You might still do it, but I made this from a long panel as well. So they start out like this and they end up like this. So let's get into it and get started. Hi, if you're new to my channel, I'm Ellie. I run Oak Apple Haberdashery, which is a fabric supplies business mostly aimed at quilters, but any sort of sewing really. And I work from my studio in Whitby on the North Yorkshire coast. I travel around the country in my van Dario, and I drink a lot of tea. And if you enjoy this content, why don't you like and subscribe? It really would help me grow. Thank you. Now, back to my video. What you'll notice on the side, they have these extra little pictures here. They're just meant to be extra little gift tags or decorations. So I tend to cut them off, and I always intend to use them later, but I don't. But it's quite a shame really, because they're really cute. So first I'm just going to trim down the side. The other one will come to you already. The other side will come already trimmed on the cut line. So I'm going to cut a similar amount off the edge of this one. Going to be about 1/2 inch or a centimetre, very roughly. Make sure you leave where it says fold, because that's going to guide you into how to fold the advent calendar up. So we'll cut through this. Oh, I've cut the leaves off the fir tree now, and a bit off the mushroom. Keep going. Sorry, Mr. Hare. I'm going to try and not cut the gift tags because they're quite nice. Get those cut. There we go. So I've left the words fold, so I know where to do that. Right, let's get it pressed. So first I'm just flattening out the main crease where it's folded in half. So, and then I'm going to just press the whole thing nice and neatly flat. I'm using a bit of best press on this one. Oh yeah, this is probably left over from a video that I made. Got googly eyes. Anyway, sorry about that. So and give it a good press before we start. And I'm going to find something less wobbly to put my camera on. Now we need to do the first fold. So you'll see, and here we are, it says fold. It says it on both sides. So what I'm going to do is just get this end here, pinch it and fold it up to the line here. Straighten that out. So we've got the two fold lines. That one's at the, this one's at the bottom of the pocket, and then you fold the pocket up to the top. Level all the lines up like this, and then you want to give it a good press. And you can either pin or clip. I think I'm going to use pins today. Sorry, Robin, didn't want to pin you. Just pinning through the layers to hold it together. There we go with this puss. And then you repeat this at each level. So we go on to the next level. There you go. Fold, pinch and fold, bring it up to the pocket, pull it down the board a bit so you can see and get it level. Mine are never completely level, I have to admit, but you know, as best you can. So on that one I've left actually a little bit of blue, so I think I might do that there. So you can see the blue line dividing it all up. Make sure it's nice and level. You could measure this if you wanted it to be really precise. Mine I've just noticed isn't there, so we'll just move that back down a bit. So you can see now the pockets have all got much shorter and they're all pinned in place. You could probably tack these pockets if you wanted to, but I am definitely lazy and I just go straight onto the sewing. But I'm making mine for an example. If you want yours to be a really pristine work of art for a beloved family member, you might well want to tack it, hold it all nicely together. But I'm just going to go with this pinned. The first bit, so now this is how it looks, and that's actually the most tricky bit done. So now what we need to do is find some wadding and some backing. So we'll go and find something suitably festive to go with this. So we're getting ready to make our sandwich now. So what you need is your advent calendar and you need some wadding. I've used 8 to 20, but really it's with an advent calendar you could probably use anything that you've got, any bits and bobs you've got lying around, but this was an end of bolt that I had, so I'm going to use that, and some backing fabric. And I've just chosen this snowflakes one. I just thought it went with the Christmas theme. The backing fabric and the wadding need to be slightly bigger than the advent calendar front. Okay, we're going to start with the backing fabric, and that's going to be the wrong side facing. Next, our batting or wadding, whatever you like to call it. And this doesn't have a right or wrong side, obviously. So as long as you've covered all of the backing fabric, it should be good. So smooth it all out, or smoothen as my kids used to say when they were little, smoothing it out. And then your advent calendar top goes obviously on top. Checking that you've got your backing fabric, make sure that it covers all of your panel. Now, to hold this secure, I actually like to use sometimes an adhesive spray, such as this one, 505, I think, is quite a good one. So using the fabric, this is only temporary, so you can reposition, just holds it steady. So we'll lay that. I tend to do this near an open window because it does have a bit of a pong. And then we'll do the top half. Just roll it back, bit of your 505, put it back again, smooth it out. And now we've got to do, so now we've put the bottom to the middle, and now we've got to put the top to the middle. So I haven't trimmed my threads actually here, so make sure you trim your threads as you go, because it's less work at the end. So again, I'm just going to spray it on the wadding here. Put this down, and you can see if it sticks, you can lift it up and move it again. And then this is just going to hold it while you quilt it through. Again, you can tack or baste it to hold it more firmly, but the advent calendars are quite small. So this, for me, I find this spray works fine. So once I've smoothed out any wrinkles, I'm going to go and get it quilted. I might just trim off this because I have got quite a lot left on the bottom. There's no sense in putting more through than I need, so let's just trim that bit off. There we go. Right, so I'm just going to do minimal quilting on this because this one's only just going to be an example for this video and on my store when I want to sell the panels to show people the end product. So I'm literally just going to quilt around each pocket so that it holds it steady and around the edges. If I was doing this for myself, I think I would really go to town on this picture, quilt this and maybe embellish it with like little sequins or hand sewing, but as it is, I'm just literally going to quilt it to hold it together. So I've very roughly quilted this, quilted all the pockets, and I've done 2 wiggly lines across the top just to try and hold it. I'll show you on the back so you can see, just to try and hold it together. And the next thing to do is just trim it down into shape. So now I'm going to neaten the edges, and I'm just going to cut them along the edge of the print using my rotary cutter and my ruler, but you could just do it with scissors if you don't have those. Get rid of that. I'm just going to go all the way around the 4 sides of the calendar doing that. Get it as square as you can. If you're like me, they never end up completely square, but then I think I am a little bit slapdash, but don't tell the Quilters Guild. Okay. Bit. And the next step is to bind these edges so that we're hiding the raw edges. So we need some contrasting fabric to do that with. I think I want some red. I wonder whether this, oh, what about this dimply one? This might work quite well. I quite like that. think that'll be quite a good, make a nice frame for it. So the next step is to measure all 4 sides of our calendar, add them together, and then add on, I usually add on about another 6 inches. So I'm just going to put in here and say that I got the maths wrong. And actually, you probably need to add about 8 to 12 inches to your binding, as I discovered when I ran out. In my defence, it was my birthday that day, and I was keen to get home for some cake. Let's give it a go. So each strip is 44 inches long. So in theory, 2 strips, that should do it, shouldn't it? So that should be 88. So that should actually work. So let's try that. Oops. Always miss a bit, honestly. And another one. There we go. 2 lots of 3 inches. Back. So I've got my binding cut, and now I'm going to join the 2 lengths together. And so I'll do this by this one right side up, and I put this one on top at 90 degrees. I think that's right, 90 degrees. And I'm going to sew along the diagonal. So what I do to be helpful to myself is just mark a line here. So I'm going to sew along this line here. And you can pin this if you want. In fact, I probably should pin it. I'm going to sew along this line. So when we open it out, they're joined up, and we're going to just trim off this bit here about 1/4 of an inch away from the edge of the seam. I often forgot to press go on my video. Genius. So there we go. So that's what it looked like. And after I cut it, that's what it looked like. There we go. So then you need to press. I vary between pressing to one side or pressing open, but I think on this one I'm going to press it open because I feel like there would be less bulk to sew around the binding. So that's what I'm going for on this one. It's got such a wobbly ironing board, I need to find a good place for it to stand. Go. Press that open. There we go. And the next thing to do is at one end we need to make a diagonal cut again. Need to do about like that. I think that's about right. So I'm going to just cut the diagonal bit off there. This is where we're going to start attaching the binding to the advent calendar. So cut a little bit off there, and I'm going to fold this over. I'm going to fold this over and make a little hem there, which I'm just going to press. And I'm going to trim off his little ear as well. There we go. And the next step is to fold the binding in half all the way along and press it flat. I'm using my best press, but you don't need to. I just think it makes life a bit easier. So I'm going to go along the length of the binding, pressing it in half. Okay, that's all nicely pressed in half. There's our join. It's worked quite well, I think. Okay, now the next step is to put the binding onto the advent calendar. Now, I have two ways of doing this. So if I was doing a really posh quilt that I wanted to treasure, I would machine it onto the front, bring it round and hand sew on the back so that it looked really neat. But I'm in a bit of a hurry, so what I'm going to do is machine it onto the back first and then machine it round onto the front. Personally, I don't think it gives as good a finish when you do it that way, but I've got a show to go to, so I'm going to do it this way, so it's the quickest way to do it. So I'm starting on the back. So do you remember we made this little bit here? You could make a hem on that and sew it in, but as you've already discovered, I'm quite lazy and I'm not going to. So to start with, what we'll do is we'll put it along the long side, about halfway along, and we're just going to sew a little bit in. So we're going to sew maybe about 6 or 8 inches in, just on the single side first. And this means that when we get back round with our binding, we can tuck it in and finish it off neatly. So we're going to first of all sew this little bit on. So this is where you could use a walking foot, but my machine has a float function, so it doesn't quite, you can set it so it doesn't quite press the foot down fully, and for me that works well enough for doing this. I've also lengthened my stitch length. I'm going for 3.6. Right. And also what I do is I don't use the 1/4 inch stitch allowance, seam allowance. I'm using the width of my sewing machine foot, so it must be like about 1/2 inch. I've just run the edge of my foot along there. I find that way works well for me. I'm probably breaking all the rules, but you know, you've got to find your own way, see what works, what you like, because quilting's all about being happy and enjoying it and enjoying what you make, and we have enough rules in life, so you've got to find your own way sometimes. I think that's far enough. So okay, so you can see there I have sewn that bit on, and what I'm going to do now is go all the way around this like this, so we won't stop. We'll leave a gap open here. So I'm going to start maybe about 3 or 4 inches along so that I can open this out to tuck the tail end in as I go. So we're going to go round. So you're going to need to stop about 1/4 of an inch before you get to this edge. So I do it by just sticking a bit of my finger on there. I'm teaching you bad habits. You might want to watch someone who teaches you the absolute perfect habits. Now, the traditional way is to go at right angles and come off at the corner here. But what I'm doing is I'm going to go off at 90 degrees here, and you come off. So I've sewn all along there. I got to about 1/4 of an inch, which is like sort of the end of my finger from the end, and then I've come off straight up there. I'm going to make my corner. So this goes up, and what you want to do is line it up with the corner. Okay, so you can see that I've come off here. So now I'm going to put my binding. Don't look that I've got a bit of the selvage there. We'll pretend that that hasn't happened. Okay, so I'm making a diagonal corner here, folded this up, and then I'm going to fold it back down onto the next bit. So it's like you're turning the corner, but you're putting a little diagonal fold in it. So your fabric sits like this, and it's folded up underneath. And now I'm going to start sewing from the edge again along this bit. And you see, I don't think you can see, there we go. Hard to. So I've come off at the end. Again, remember, at the right angles we fold it up, make a diagonal, and then bring it back down again. There we go. And start sewing on the end again. So as you are approaching the, remember where we did the start, so going to overlap here a little bit. So I'm going along, mindful of where my join is here, and what I'll do is I'll trim this off to start with, roughly about here. It's going to tuck inside this, so we probably need to trim a bit more, but what I do is a trim. So it's going to go about here. I make a little point like that. So it's going to fit in a bit more easy. There we go. And so you've made your little point, and it tucks in there, and Bob's your uncle. It's there. So we're going to sew over that. Making sure it's nicely tucked in. And join up with our stitching, and we've gone all the way round. So that's where our ends have nicely tucked in there. So now our binding's sewn on all the way around at the back. I'm going to pull it round to the front, and that's what we're aiming for. So this is why I do the 3-inch strips, because I think it gives you a bit more to play with when you're bringing it round to the front. So next thing is to press this. So here we go, we're going to bring it round start by sort of smoothing the advent calendar out, the edges of it like this. I'm going to go, you probably should trim off some ends, but you know, I'm having a lazy day today. So I'm going into the corner and just get my clips. And I'm going to pull the binding down over the front, and I'm using these little clips to hold it in place. Oh, that's a strong one. And then this is where we form our corner. So we go up to the corner, bring the next one down, and try to line these up so that they don't overlap. Now this is why I like to do this on the back, because I think it does give you a neater finish. But I've got a show to go to, so let's start. I'm at Malvern later on this week, so I need to have an example for the customers to see the made up thing. So let's hope they don't look too closely. So we'll pull that in. That's fairly neat. You wouldn't see that from too far away. So we're going to go round all the way round doing this. So now I've clipped the binding on all the way round, and the last thing left to do, well, not quite the last thing because we've got to put some hanging loops on, but the last thing to do for this part is to top stitch all the way around. So we'll do that now, and I'm going to swap over to a red thread because it'll match, and I'm actually going to use Orifil 40 weight, which is really good for top stitching. It just shows up a little bit more, but the main reason I'm using this one is because it's going to match better. It's a lovely colour, isn't it? I like that colour. And I'm going to top stitch as close to the edge as I can. Let's see if I can do it neatly. And that's us finished. I think that looks quite nice. Not the neatest you've ever seen, but at least the customers can see what they're going to end up with.